Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was off the second Mason Lorne walked into the conference room, wearing that smug little half-smile he always wore when he was about to drop some corporate turd on our heads and call it leadership. You know the type? New blood from corporate, sharp suit, soft hands, smells like he marinates in axe and spreadsheets. He stood at the front like he was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address, then tapped the mic, even though it didn't need tapping, just to assert dominance. Then came the sentence that sucked the oxygen out of the room. All performance bonuses are frozen until further notice. No explanation beyond some vague bullshit about performance realignment and cost discipline during transformation. No eye contact, no humanity, just numbers and buzzwords rolling off his tongue like he was reading a cereal box. There was a pause, just a second long, but you could hear a pin drop. Then the room shifted. People glanced sideways, some with eyebrows raised, others just staring forward like someone had slapped them, but they weren't sure if it was personal yet. A guy from sales, Kevin, blinked 3 times like he was rebooting. My colleague Dana dropped her pen. And me, I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just sat there, hands folded, heart thudding against my ribcage like it was trying to warn me. Because I knew something Mason didn't. Schedule B, clause buried in our executive compensation contracts, the one I helped write back when we still had a real general counsel, and not Mason's bootlicker legal team. The one that made it very clear. Bonuses could not be unilaterally frozen without documented justification, proper notice, and committee sign-off. No rubber stamping, no verbal shrugs. Violations carried a very specific monetary penalty per affected contract. Not optional, not negotiable. But Mason, he didn't even glance at HR before dropping the nuke. That's how cocky he was. Now, before we go any deeper, look, I know 93% of you are listening to this without subscribing. That's fine, I get it. We all ghost watch YouTube like we're sneaking snacks at midnight. But it really does help the team when you hit that subscribe button and give it a like. Keeps us going, keeps the stories coming, and maybe, keeps the Masons of the world from thinking they can get away with this crap. Anyway, back to the meeting. After Mason finished his briefing, which was really just a corporate drive-by, he closed the folder in front of him like that was the end of the conversation. Some clapped like good little soldiers. Most didn't. A few people muttered. No one stood up to challenge him, not yet. He dismissed us with a smirk, like he'd just done us all a favor by pulling the plug early. I walked back to my desk without saying a word. I could feel the buzz of disbelief humming through the office like bad wiring. People whispering, venting in the break room, texting under desks. HR was already dodging emails. The comp and benefits guy, Mark, one of Mason's recent imports, suddenly had an out-of-office reply on for the rest of the day. Coward. I opened my laptop and pulled up the internal compliance drive. Me less than a minute to find the policy draft. Schedule B, Revision 6, titled Executive Variable Compensation and Enforcement Guidelines. Drafted 2 years ago. Ratified. Digitally signed by the former GC, timestamped in the compliance log. Effective clause. In the event of unilateral suspension of bonus agreements without procedural due process, a penalty of $50,000 per affected executive contract shall apply, enforceable via external audit escalation. I leaned back and let that sink in. 48 contracts, 48 executive or senior level employees with bonus eligibility language tied directly to Schedule B. Do the math. I didn't say anything that afternoon, didn't forward the file, didn't march into anyone's office. Instead, I quietly opened a fresh folder on my desktop and titled it Audit. Schedule B. I began assembling every piece of documentation I'd need. Signature logs, emails from the comp team acknowledging the clause, previous audit reports citing the policy's presence in legal records. Everything. Because Mason didn't just break the rules. He broke the one rule that carried a financial grenade in its back pocket, and I was going to make damn sure someone pulled the pin. By Wednesday, the place smelled like a mutiny waiting to happen. Sales reps were stomping around like caged bulls, slamming phones, barking into headsets, and muttering about lawyers between calls. You don't dangle commission-based bonuses in front of people like a carrot for a whole fiscal year, and then yank them off the table without expecting blood on the carpet. One guy, Brent from Enterprise Accounts, printed out last year's bonus structure and taped it to his cubicle with the words "fraud is not a cost-saving strategy" scrawled across it in red Sharpie. HR, missing in action. You'd think the department responsible for people would be fielding questions. Nope. Vanished like roaches when the lights come on. Emails went unanswered. Calendar invites got mysteriously declined. Their director, Sheila, the same one who used to bake brownies for staff birthdays, suddenly started holding all her meetings behind closed doors with a new regular guest, Mark. Mark, Mason's handpicked compensation and benefits lead. Fresh from corporate, wearing loafers that cost more than my rent, and a haircut that looked like it was afraid of the wind. You could smell the smug on him. He made a show of walking the floor with a clipboard, nodding at people, pretending to listen. Everyone hated him on site. Someone from accounting asked him whether the bonus freeze violated any contract language. He smiled and said, "Well, I'm still getting up to speed, but we're realigning incentives holistically." Translation, go screw yourself. I didn't ask him anything. I didn't need to. I had the originals. Back in my apartment that night, I opened my old hard copy files, yes, actual paper, and dug through the manila folders I kept for things like this. Not paranoia. Insurance. I found the original draft of Schedule B with my handwritten notes in the margins. Notes I'd made during the 2021 policy overhaul when our previous general counsel, Ava Whitmore, was still running a tight legal ship. She and I had worked side by side on that clause for weeks, tailoring it to prevent the very thing Mason had just pulled. The penalty wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. It was a landmine we placed under the surface to keep execs honest. You couldn't touch the bonus structure without activating it. One note stood out in bright blue ink. Ava had scribbled $50K penalty per breach, non-negotiable, board approved. I sat back and smiled. That wasn't policy fluff. That was financial napalm. Now, I wasn't naive. I knew damn well that internal escalation was going to hit a brick wall. Mason had made sure of it, was swapping out people faster than most of us could learn their names. Whole departments were being realigned. Rumor had it he'd fired someone in procurement for asking about vendor caps. No way legal or HR was going to throw him under the bus, not unless the wheels were already moving. So I wrote the memo anyway, titled it plainly, Schedule B Compliance Query, Unilateral Bonus Suspension. Attached the relevant contract language, screenshots from the digital archive, the policy approval logs, and even a snippet from the 2022 audit summary that confirmed Schedule B was active and enforceable. I ended it with one line, "Please confirm this action was reviewed and approved in accordance with Schedule B protocol. If not, please advise on remediation." I sent it to HR, legal, and Mark. I CC'd no one else. No gossip. No smoke signals. 3 hours later, got a reply. From HR, it read, "This matter is considered closed." No greeting, no signature. Just those 5 words like a brick through a window. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I copied the entire email chain and saved it to a new folder on a secure thumb drive. Labeled it Whistle Ready. I didn't reply. Didn't forward it. Didn't even mention it to Dana or the other compliance leads. Instead, I printed out the final memo, tucked it in the folder labeled Audit, Schedule B, and locked it in my file cabinet under a different name, Holiday Schedule Template. If Mason thought he'd buried the problem with a brush-off email and a corporate puppet, he was in for a surprise. Because I wasn't protesting. I was waiting, and I was very, very good at waiting. The moment I hit send on the memo, I knew they'd bury it, not because it wasn't rock solid, not because it lacked teeth, but because it had too many. When someone like Mason is running the show, facts aren't obstacles, they're threats. And people who bring those facts, they get labeled difficult, uncooperative, or my personal favorite, not a culture fit. Still, I did it by the book. I wrote it clean and surgical, no emotion, no accusations, just data. Subject line, Schedule B Compliance Query, Executive Bonus Freeze Recipients. HR Director, Sheila W. Interim Legal Counsel, Peter Y. Mark from Comp and Benefits. Attachments, PDF of Schedule B, original and revised, digital signature logs, timestamp screenshots from the internal policy archive, and a spreadsheet of contract templates, all hyperlinked and watermarked. I even quoted the clause directly in the body of the memo. Per Schedule B, Section 4.2, in the event of unilateral suspension of executive variable compensation without committee approval and minimum 14-day notice, a penalty of $50,000 per contract shall apply, enforceable via external audit. I added a simple question beneath it. Was this policy reviewed prior to the recent suspension of executive bonuses? If not, please advise on steps toward remediation. That's it. No fluff. No footnotes. Just the blade. The response came 2 hours later, from HR. This matter is considered closed. No signature. No context. Just 5 dead-weight words, the digital equivalent of slamming a door in my face. A denial so lazy, it was practically begging to be exhumed later during an investigation. I stared at it, not in shock. I'd predicted this exact outcome. This wasn't the kind of organization where truth prevailed. It was the kind where power protected itself, even if it meant driving straight into a wall and blaming the dashboard. So I didn't follow up, didn't nudge, didn't forward it to the board or reply with flaming indignation. Instead, I pressed Ctrl+P, printed every page, the memo, the policy, the attachments, the reply. Each document had metadata embedded. The kind of digital fingerprints auditors love: timestamps, internal server paths, edit histories. Impossible to scrub. I printed those too. Then I took out the navy blue folder from my filing drawer, the one labeled Holiday Schedule Template in clean block letters. Inside was the preliminary file I'd started after the all-hands meeting. I slid the new pages in, organized them by escalation order, and clicked the brass fasteners shut. Then I relabeled the tab Audit, Schedule B, no ceremony, no ominous music, just the quiet click of a cabinet locking shut. I didn't bring it home. Email it to a burner address. That's amateur hour. No, I kept it exactly where it needed to be, in the company's own damn building, protected under the same badge access that Mason thought made him untouchable. Because when the fire starts, the worst place to hide the matches is outside. Let them come looking. And while they were busy looking the other way, smoothing press releases, slapping each other's backs in board meetings, I began the next step. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was from an internal ethics memo sent by our audit firm the year prior. Titled, Confidential Reporting Pathways for Compliance Concerns. It outlined 3 methods for whistleblower submissions: anonymous call line, secure email, and internal integrity portal with file upload. And crucially, listed protections for documented submissions under third-party review. I bookmarked it, but I didn't act yet, not until audit week officially began. Timing mattered, because if I was going to light the fuse, I wanted every single person in that room when it blew. And Mason, he was too busy playing emperor to realize someone just pulled the pin and placed the grenade under his throne. Audit week rolled in with all the subtlety of a marching band at a funeral, but Mason strutted through the halls like it was his personal coronation. He wore a new blazer, navy, expensive, kept a leather-bound notebook tucked under his arm like it held state secrets instead of recycled talking points. Every time the auditors stepped into a department, Mason found a reason to just happen to be passing by. He laughed too loudly in the cafeteria, staged bump-ins with the board chair, quoted quarterly metrics like Bible verses, even brought artisanal donuts into the third-floor break room with a handwritten sign that said Audit Fuel Courtesy of Leadership, classic predator in peacetime behavior. To him, this was theater, a PR pageant, one more thing to fake his way through while he lined up a bigger title at some other doomed company. But to me, it was game time. I waited until Tuesday morning, second day of the audit, when they were still deep in departmental interviews and hadn't yet circled toward compliance or comp, and then I acted. I logged into the secure internal portal of the audit firm. No company devices, no work Wi-Fi. I used my personal laptop, VPN on, tethered through my phone. I'd memorized the submission process a year ago, back when I thought I might need it if the old CFO tried to bury a vendor scandal. Never had to use it until now. The portal was bare bones and sterile. A single upload button, an optional notes field, and a drop-down menu that asked, "Do you request anonymity?" I paused, then clicked no. Wasn't afraid of being named. I was afraid of them ignoring it. I attached the full contents of the folder, labeled and ordered. Schedule B full text, signed, Rev 6, digital signature logs, A, Whitmore, GC, policy addendum approval chain, screenshot, internal compliance portal, active clause, time/date stamped, breach summary, Charlotte R, compliance lead, email response from HR matter considered closed. In the notes field, I wrote, submitted under integrity protection policy. Policy clause enforceable as per audit protocols outlined in 2022 summary. Breach count, 48. Estimated penalty, $2.4 million. No internal remediation offered. I hovered over the submit button for exactly 3 seconds. Not out of fear, out of clarity. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I wasn't even doing it to get my own bonus back. I was doing it because people like Mason play roulette with other people's paychecks and assume no one will load the chamber. I clicked submit. Then I shut the laptop, stood up, took a walk to the far stairwell where no one ever went except IT guys and smokers trying not to be seen. I sat there for 20 quiet minutes, phone face down, heart hammering against my ribs, not out of anxiety, but adrenaline. The kind you get when the safety comes off. No one knew what I'd done. I hadn't spoken a word, hadn't left any trace. No CCs, no Slack messages, no whispered, hey, guess what I just did over drinks in the break room. Because gossip, that's how things get sabotaged. I'd learned that lesson too many times from watching others get burned. Silence was power. And right now, I was silent. By Thursday, Mason was in full parade mode. He brought the auditors bottled water, had them escorted by interns like they were visiting dignitaries. Threw in buzzwords during team briefings: synergy, value stream, engagement optimization. The man couldn't tell a bonus clause from a broomstick, but he could sure as hell sell you air and call it gold. He didn't even flinch when the audit firm asked for a full download of compensation protocols tied to executive incentive structures. Just waved it off and told Mark to handle it. Watched it all from a distance. Didn't blink, didn't interfere. My part was done. The fuse had been lit. And no one, not Mason, not HR, not the flailing yes men surrounding them, had any idea how close they were to stepping on the blast. By Friday morning, the arrogance had ripened into full-blown delusion. Mason had turned the office into his personal stage. Every time the auditors surfaced from a meeting room, there he was, like a bad penny with a Bluetooth headset, schmoozing, grinning, offering tidbits no one asked for. He even handed out pre-printed one-pagers titled Transformation in Action, performance realignment highlights with bullet points like expense optimization through incentive reevaluation. Translation: we screwed 48 people out of money and called it innovation. That morning, I heard him in the hallway outside the finance wing, talking to VP Monique Daniels from Strategic Ops. Been on the fence about Mason since day one, sharp woman, used to real process, not smoke shows. Mason was leaned against the wall like he was auditioning for Shark Tank. I paused near the copy room just in time to hear this gem. Look, no one actually reads Schedule B. It's boilerplate. It's there to check a box, not to enforce anything. Trust me, corporate knows that. The board knows that. Monique didn't say anything, but I smiled. Just faintly, just enough to feel it twist at the corners of my mouth. Boilerplate. The man had just publicly dismissed the clause that was about to kick his financial teeth in. That same afternoon, the auditors made their first request that broke script. They asked Mason's team to provide full and unredacted documentation pertaining to executive compensation agreements, bonus eligibility terms, and internal correspondence regarding the recent incentive freeze. Not summaries, not spreadsheets, the real thing. That's when the cracks started. Instead of complying immediately, Mason sent Mark, the comp and benefits mouthpiece, to stall. Mark told the audit team that the bonus data was currently undergoing recalibration and that they'd provide aggregated snapshots by end of day. That's corporate speak for, we're hiding something and need time to Photoshop the damage. By 3 p.m., the auditors received was a PDF bundle of redacted spreadsheets. Names blacked out, columns blurred, notes missing. One document had so many red bars it looked like someone murdered a spreadsheet in cold blood. The lead auditor, a wiry guy named Nolan with the emotional range of drywall, opened the file on his laptop and stared at it for a full 10 seconds before saying, "This is incomplete." Mark, visibly sweating for the first time since he got here, heard something about data sensitivity. Nolan didn't blink, just closed the laptop, said, "We'll revisit this." That was the first real moment. You could feel it in the air, like when the wind shifts before a storm. The sales floor got quieter. HR started popping in and out of meeting rooms. Even Monique stopped pretending to care about small talk and retreated to her office with the blinds shut. The auditors weren't dumb. They knew redactions this thick meant someone was scared, and scared people make mistakes. Later that evening, I passed Mason's office on my way out. His door was open. He was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, face tight, voice clipped. I caught one sentence as I passed: "They don't have anything real. Worst case, we pay a fine and bury it." He still didn't know. Didn't know that what they had came from someone who did read Schedule B. Someone who wrote half of it. Someone who made sure the documentation wasn't theoretical or interpretive, but signed, sealed, time-stamped, and policy-anchored in a way no redaction could touch. So I walked out the front doors into the fading afternoon light. No part of me was nervous, because the tension wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Mason. And by Monday, he'd be drowning in it. Friday morning, 7:42 a.m. My coffee had gone cold, untouched, sitting beside a pile of sticky notes that hadn't moved since Tuesday. I was technically working from home, but let's be honest, I wasn't doing much that morning except watching the clock and refreshing the audit firm's shared calendar like it held a lottery ticket. The board meeting was scheduled for 9:30 sharp. Private, executive only. No invites to compliance. No invite to me, which was fine. I didn't need a front row seat to the implosion. I'd already pulled the trigger. I wasn't going to lean over the barrel just to admire the smoke. I logged into the remote server, opened a couple of innocuous files just to register some keystrokes. Looked like I was reviewing department compliance checklists from Q2. In reality, I was flipping back and forth between Slack and my inbox, waiting for any signal. Mason hadn't said a word to me all week, which was normal. Rarely spoke to anyone who didn't stroke his ego or hold his calendar. But that morning, he was radio silent across the board. The audit firm's calendar showed one big block: board presentation, preliminary findings, and risk disclosures. 2 hours long, no meeting link, in person only. You could practically smell the nervous deodorant from here. I took a deep breath. My apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that hums at you when your mind is racing. Your heart keeps hitting the gas even though your body's stuck in park. And then the message came through. Slack, from Aaron, one of my old compliance team leads who'd been moved to vendor oversight after Mason gutted our department. Aaron R., did you? Just that. No subject, no emoji, no preamble. I stared at it, and for a moment, I let myself imagine what my face must look like right now, stone still, jaw set, hint of a smile tugging at the corner like a secret daring to break loose. I typed back, keep your calendar open next week. No wink, no explanation, just enough. Aaron replied with a single gif, a woman zipping her lips and throwing away the key, smart girl. I glanced at the time again. 9:14 a.m. The board was probably settling in, exchanging fake smiles over boxed pastries and paper cups of conference room coffee. Mason, no doubt, standing at the head of the table with his blazer buttoned, laying it on thick. Talking about transformation this and agility that. Performance culture. Strategic pivots. Maybe even tossing in a buzzword or two for flavor. He loved that crap. But all of that was noise. Window dressing before the brick came through the glass, because I knew what Nolan, lead auditor, deadpan and unflinching, was walking in there with. The full breach summary. The contract clause. The penalty math. HR reply. Everything, and more importantly, my name on the submission. I didn't hide. I wanted it to stick. By 9:32, I stopped refreshing the calendar. Instead, I opened a clean document on my desktop. Typed 2 words at the top in bold, post-fall strategy. Because no matter how long Mason stalled, no matter how redacted his spreadsheets were, he couldn't redact reality. And when the board heard that number, when they saw the signatures, the dates, fine so clean it might as well be engraved in stone, they'd realize what kind of grenade he'd sat on. I didn't want his job. I didn't want his apology. I wanted the system that protected men like him to eat itself alive for once. And this morning, I had a front row seat, from the safety of my couch, as it began choking on the very clause he'd laughed off as boilerplate. I took a sip of cold coffee, didn't even wince. The real warmth was coming next week. COO was halfway through a 15-slide marathon about EBITDA projections when Nolan, the lead auditor, finally raised his hand. Not dramatically. Just a casual flick of the wrist, like he was about to ask whether the coffee machine in the lobby took tokens. He waited until the COO hit a bullet point about projected savings from bonus restructuring, and then calmly interrupted. Before we finalize the report, Nolan said, his voice as dry and surgical as ever, I have a question about Schedule B. You could hear someone's pen stop scribbling. Mason, seated 2 spots from the board chair, still riding the high of having made it this far without a public gutting, leaned back with that smirk he always wore when he thought he was about to sound smarter than everyone else in the room. He chuckled. Oh, that thing? The room waited. Nolan, unaffected, flipped open his audit folder like he was unboxing a weapon. In your executive bonus documentation, he said, There's a clause labeled Section 4.2, Schedule B. It states, quote, failure to follow clause protocol, including board committee review and 14-day employee notice, triggers a financial penalty of $50,000 per executive-level agreement affected by unilateral suspension. No dramatic pause. No raised voice, just a clinical scalpel slicing through the air. That's when the room went still. Not a sound, not a shuffle. Just frozen faces blinking at each other like maybe someone else would ask the obvious question first. The CFO, who'd been sipping from a thermos shaped like a golf trophy, slowly lowered it to the table. The general counsel's eyes darted to her laptop. She began typing fast. Mason's smile didn't disappear right away. It twitched, just slightly, then held firm, the way you hold a poker face when you're bluffing with a 2 and a 7. He cleared his throat. That clause is outdated. It's boilerplate. We've since, Nolan cut him off. According to internal policy logs, he said, flipping another page, the clause was reviewed and updated as recently as March 2 years ago. Digitally signed by former General Counsel Ava Whitmore. Recertified in the compliance portal. Still listed as active. He held up a packet. Here's the breach summary submitted via our internal portal. Supporting documentation includes signature logs, employee contract templates, and a formal memo from your compliance lead. The CFO turned to Mason, his voice low but audible. How many contracts were affected? Nolan didn't wait. Preliminary count is 48. Someone exhaled too loudly. It sounded like a tire losing air. Nolan continued, unfazed. Based on this clause, liability exposure is approximately $2.4 million in penalties, pending board review. The CEO, silent until now, leaned forward. Is this real? Mason's voice cracked just slightly. It's not enforceable. Nobody's actually acted on it before. I mean, until now, Nolan said flatly. He laid the documents on the table like he was setting a trap with the bait, already wriggling. I'll leave these with you for review before finalizing the report. Then he closed his folder, stood up, and excused himself from the room. No one moved. The board chair slowly swiveled to face Mason, whose face had gone from peach to concrete gray. He looked like a man who'd just been told the plane he was flying had no landing gear. The CEO tapped a finger on the table, not looking at Mason when he spoke. Was legal aware of this? The general counsel answered, barely above a whisper. We're not briefed on any suspension protocols. No sign-off, no review, silence again. Then, as if the room had finally remembered how to breathe, someone stood and walked to the hallway. The coup, pale, hands shaking, talking into his phone rapidly. Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. The smirk was gone. There were no more donuts in the break room. No more one-pagers. No more transformation slogans. Just Schedule B, the sound of a career imploding in real time. Mason let out a tight, breathless laugh that didn't fool a soul. Oh, come on, he said, voice wobbling with the kind of forced charm that usually landed better in team meetings. That's not real. It's a template clause. These things get added to pad legal language, not enforce penalties. He glanced around the table, hoping for some nods, some nervous chuckles. He got none. Nolan didn't flinch, didn't blink. He simply turned the page in the audit packet with the precision of a surgeon exposing bone. It was signed by General Counsel Ava Whitmore, he said, flipping the document to face the board. Digitally time-stamped. Uploaded to the policy archive. Effective as of March 14, 2 years ago. There's a compliance trail. Verified by metadata. Still active. The room didn't move. Then the CFO, Dennis Larkin, his entire demeanor was usually that of a sedated sea turtle, suddenly sat forward like someone had shoved an electric prod into his chair. Wait, that clause is active. Nolan gave the faintest nod. Yes, Dennis's face paled. He turned slowly toward Mason, voice low and hoarse. Did you vet this through legal before freezing bonuses? Mason stammered. It was a strategic decision. Comp and benefits flagged it as within discretionary guidelines, VP of Legal. Niel Huang stood up so fast her chair let out a screech across the conference room floor. We never reviewed this, she said. Her face was blank, but her knuckles were white around the edge of her laptop. I wanted on the record that legal was not consulted. Then she picked up her folder, tucked her laptop under her arm, and walked out. Just like that. No apology, no excuse. Just a quiet declaration of I will not go down with this ship. The CEO, who had been silent through the entire exchange, finally looked up from the audit summary and locked eyes with Mason. How many contracts were affected? He asked, voice even unreadable. Mason opened his mouth, Nothing came out. The board chair turned to Nolan. Auditor, Nolan answered without ceremony. At least 48 executive and senior level agreements. All include Schedule B clause. Preliminary penalty exposure, $2.4 million. Strangled sound came from the VP of Sales, who looked like she might throw up. Someone muttered Jesus Christ under their breath. The head of HR, Sheila, suddenly found something fascinating in her lap, staring so hard at her tablet you'd think it held the cure for humiliation. The CEO leaned back, still staring at Mason. So, the cost-saving measure you implemented is going to cost us more than we saved. And no one reviewed it. Mason tried to recover. It's not that simple. This was never meant to be punitive. We were in a cost control phase. $2.4 million, the CFO repeated, rubbing his temples. In fines, minimum, Nolan added. If we find any retroactive noncompliance or similar violations in the previous cycle, that number could increase. The temperature in the room dropped by 10 degrees. Mason looked around, searching for a lifeline. None came. His own team wouldn't meet his eyes. Mark from Comp sat silently, sweating through his collar like a man already drafting his resignation in his head. Nolan placed the audit summary neatly on the center of the table. We will finalize the report over the weekend. Full documentation will be submitted to the board and the General Oversight Committee by Monday morning. He gathered his things, clicked his pen, and nodded once toward the CEO. Thank you. Then he left. Only sound in the room was the slow creak of the board chair adjusting in his seat. Then a whisper, "Get him out of here." No yelling, no dramatics. Just the quiet finality of a man realizing that his organization's greatest liability wasn't on a balance sheet. It was sitting 2 chairs away, wearing a $900 suit and a smirk that had finally run out of shelf life. By Monday morning, the office felt like it had been emptied with a vacuum hose. And were the peppy good mornings, the scent of burnt coffee wafting from the break room, and Mason's voice echoing down the hallways like he was the mayor of some small, delusional kingdom. The glass-walled executive wing was dark. Lights off, doors closed. The kind of eerie silence that settles over a place after a controlled detonation. The email came in at 7:03 a.m. sharp. From HR, but not from Sheila. Subject, board request confidential meeting from Nadine Feldman, board HR liaison location. 9th floor executive conference room C time, 10 o'clock a.m. Note, please arrive alone. No devices, no explanation, no pleasantries, just direction. I took the elevator up at 9:58. The doors opened to a floor I hadn't set foot on in months, back when compliance still had teeth and Mason hadn't gutted the place like a foreclosure. Different now. Quieter. No interns carrying coffee, no assistants pacing. Just Nadine standing outside conference room C with a tablet pressed against her chest and a look that didn't give anything away. She motioned for me to enter. They're ready for you. Inside, the board chair sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 directors, the general counsel and CFO Dennis, still looking like he hadn't slept since Friday. The room smelled like fresh ink and tension. Charlotte, the chair said, standing halfway as I took a seat. Thank you for coming. They didn't waste time. No interrogation. No recap of events. No victory lap. Just this, we've reviewed the audit documentation. The board has voted to reverse the bonus freeze effective immediately. Retroactive payouts will begin processing this week. He paused. We also recognize that our internal oversight has failed, and that, if not for your diligence, our exposure could have been far worse. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, an offer letter, Director of Ethics and Internal Controls, reporting directly to the board, independent of the C-suite, full budget authority. My salary would increase by 27%. No probationary period, no approval needed from HR or legal. They didn't ask for a thank you, and I didn't offer one. I nodded once. I accept. No smile, no theatrics, just cold, clean closure. By noon, word had spread. Not officially, but you could feel it in the way people moved. Doors stayed open longer. Slack channels started buzzing again. The atmosphere had shifted, like someone had cracked a window in a room that had been sealed for too long. At 2:17 p.m., I stood at the end of the hallway by the elevators and watched from a distance. Mason was packing up his office. 2 boxes, 1 monitor. Glass award he'd given himself 3 months ago for strategic reinvention. No press release. No farewell email. No last meeting. Just a quiet escort, 2 security staffers in navy polos walking beside him like they were guiding a lost tourist out of a restricted exhibit. He never looked up, but he knew I was there. He paused for a moment at the hallway's end. His eyes scanned the floor like maybe, just maybe, he'd find something he could use to claw his way back. He didn't, and me, I stood still. No wave, no nod, no smug grin, just unreadable silence, because I didn't need to say anything. He already knew who lit the match. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.